The pipe organ music swelled, filling the vaulted ceiling of the old stone church with a heavy, dramatic sound that vibrated in my chest. I stood at the very back of the aisle, my arm linked through my father, clutching a bouquet of white roses that hid a terrible secret deep within its petals. To the 300 guests turning in their wooden pews to look at me, I must have looked like the perfect, blushing bride. My dress was a cloud of silk and lace, a garment that had cost more than my first car, and my veil drifted around me like a soft mist. But under the layers of tulle and expensive makeup, my heart wasn't fluttering with love or nervous anticipation. It was beating with the slow, cold rhythm of a predator about to spring a trap. I looked down the long aisle toward the altar where Prescott stood. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, the very picture of a devoted groom, his hands clasped in front of him, a small, confident smile playing on his lips. He thought he was the winner today. He thought he was securing a future of comfort and status. He had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath his feet was already crumbling. As I began my slow walk toward him, I didn't focus on his eyes. I focused on the cream-colored programs held in the hands of every single guest. They were printed on heavy, expensive cardstock, elegant and tasteful. The front displayed our names in gold foil script, but the priest, who I had spoken to minutes before the service, gave me a subtle nod as I approached. The trap was set, and there was no turning back now. 72 hours earlier, the world had looked very different. I was in the middle of our living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and ribbons, deep in the blissful chaos of final wedding preparations. I was humming a song, thinking about the seating chart, when my front door flew open. It was Zayla, my best friend and maid of honor. She didn't knock, she just burst in, and the look on her face stopped the music in my head instantly. She looked sick, her skin pale and clammy, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and nausea. I dropped the ribbon I was holding. "Zayla, what's wrong? Is it the caterer? Did the flowers die?" I asked, my mind immediately jumping to logistical disasters. Zayla shook her head frantically, closing the door behind her and leaning against it for support. "Solange, you need to sit down. Please just sit down." Her voice was trembling. I didn't sit. I walked over to her, grabbing her arms. "Tell me now." She took a deep, shaky breath and pulled her phone out of her pocket. "I was bored last night," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I downloaded Tinder just for fun to swipe while I watched movies. Solange, I found him." I laughed, a short, confused sound. "Found who? Prescott? Probably an old profile he forgot to delete years ago. Don't worry about it." Zayla didn't smile. She unlocked her phone and shoved the screen toward my face. "It says online now, Solange. Look at the bio." I looked. The photo was new, and the text read, "Getting married this weekend, looking for one last ride before the shackles go on." The room seemed to tilt sideways. The air in my lungs turned into solid ice. I stared at the tiny screen, reading those words over and over again until they blurred together. Shackles. He called our marriage shackles. He called me a prison. My hand started to shake so violently that I couldn't even hold Zayla's phone. She caught it before it hit the floor and guided me to the sofa. "Breathe," she commanded, rubbing my back. "Solange, you have to breathe." But I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was drowning in the middle of my own living room. Prescott was at work. He had kissed me goodbye that morning, told me he loved me, and then logged onto a dating app to find a stranger to sleep with 3 days before our vows. "We have to be sure," Zayla said, her voice turning hard and serious. "We can't blow up the wedding on a hunch even though I know it's him. We need proof, undeniable proof." She pulled out her own phone. "We are going to trap him." We spent the next 20 minutes crafting a fake profile. We used photos of a model Zayla knew from college, someone Prescott would never have met, and named her Veda. We set the location to a 1-mile radius of his office. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as Zayla's thumb hovered over the screen. She swiped right on Prescott's profile. We waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. I started to hope desperately that he wouldn't see it, that he was busy working. Then, at the 3-minute mark, a notification pinged. "It's a match!" Almost instantly, a message bubble appeared. It was Prescott. "Hey, gorgeous, want to help me relieve some pre-wedding stress?" Reading that message felt like being punched in the stomach by someone wearing brass knuckles. The nausea rose in my throat, hot and acidic. Veda was a complete stranger to him. He didn't know her, didn't know anything about her, yet he was ready to throw away 5 years of our relationship for a cheap thrill with a stranger. Zayla looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, waiting for my signal. "Do it," I whispered, my voice sounding hollow and foreign to my own ears. "Keep him talking." "I want to know everything." Zayla began to type, her fingers flying across the screen. As Veda, she acted flirtatious but curious. She asked the question that would destroy me. "Aren't you worried about your fiancé finding out?" Prescott's reply came within seconds, the typing bubble pulsing mockingly before the text appeared. "Solange, she's safe. Boring, good for a housewife, but she has no spark. I need excitement." I read the words and something inside of me snapped. Boring, no spark. I had supported him through his career changes. I had nursed him when he was sick. I had planned this entire wedding to be exactly what he wanted. To him, I was just a safety net, a dull appliance he could keep at home while he had his fun elsewhere. Then the phone buzzed again. He sent a photo. It was a selfie taken in the bathroom of his office. He was wearing the gray silk tie I had picked out for him yesterday morning. He was smiling, a lecherous, hungry look in his eyes that I had never seen directed at me. That photo was the final nail in the coffin of my love for him. It wasn't just betrayal. It was emotional annihilation. "Keep him talking," I told Zayla, standing up. My legs felt weak, but my mind was suddenly sharp, fueled by a cold, dark rage. "I need to check something." I walked into Prescott's home office. Usually I respected his privacy. I never went through his things, but today the rules of our relationship had been incinerated. I needed his passport number for the honeymoon bookings, or at least that would be my excuse if he walked in. But I wasn't looking for his passport. I went straight to his desk and opened his laptop. He was careless with security at home. His password was simply his birthday. The screen flickered to life. I ignored his emails and went straight to the banking tab saved in his bookmarks. My breath hitched as I logged into our joint accounts. We had a specific savings account labeled House Fund. We had been contributing to it for 2 years, saving for a down payment on a beautiful colonial house in the suburbs. We were supposed to close on the property right after the honeymoon. I clicked on the balance. It should have held $50,000. The screen loaded. Balance, $42.15. I stared, blinking, sure that it was a glitch. I clicked on the transaction history. Page after page of transfers to online gambling sites, credit card payments for cards I didn't know existed, and cash withdrawals at casinos. He hadn't just cheated on me with women, he had stolen our future. The house wasn't ours. The money was gone. He had drained every penny while telling me to pick out paint colors for a nursery that would never exist. The sound of the front door unlocking downstairs made me freeze. I quickly closed the browser tabs, shut the laptop, and wiped my fingerprints off the metal casing. I ran out of the office and met Zayla in the hallway. "He's home," I hissed. "Hide the phone." Zayla shoved her phone into her purse just as Prescott walked up the stairs. He was carrying a bouquet of cheap supermarket flowers and wearing that same confident, lying smile I had seen in the photo. "Hey, beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head so his lips landed on my cheek. It took every ounce of my willpower not to scream, not to claw his eyes out right there on the landing. "I brought you these," he said, handing me the wilting carnations. "And good news, I just got off the phone with the bank. The mortgage is all handled." He lied to my face without blinking. He looked me in the eyes and lied about money he had already gambled away. I felt a sudden urge to run to the bedroom, pack a bag, and leave. I wanted to escape this nightmare immediately. But then I looked at him, so smug, so sure of his control over me. If I left now, crying and screaming, he would spin the story. He would tell everyone I got cold feet. He would tell his mother, Petra, that I was unstable. He would keep the deposits for the wedding vendors. He would play the victim, and I would be the runaway bride. I looked at Zayla, then back at Prescott. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt like wearing a mask made of lead. "That's wonderful, honey," I said. "Thank you for handling it." I wasn't going to leave, not yet. I was going to burn his reputation to the ground, and I was going to do it in front of everyone he knew. The next morning, while Prescott was at work, I put my plan into motion. I drove to the local print shop that was handling our wedding stationery. The owner, Mr. Henderson, was an old friend of my father's. He greeted me with a warm smile, which faded when he saw the look in my eyes. "Solan, is everything okay with the order? The programs are already boxed up." I placed a USB drive on the counter. "There's been a critical error, Mr. Henderson. A change of plans. I need the programs reprinted. Immediately. He looked confused. But the wedding is in 2 days. It will cost a fortune to rush this order. I pulled out my credit card, my personal one, not the joint one Prescott had emptied. I don't care about the cost, but I need you to promise me something. Do not look at the file, just print it. He hesitated, but he saw the desperation and the steel in my gaze. All right, Solange, for you. I had spent the entire night before compiling the evidence. The USB drive didn't contain a hymn or a prayer. It contained high-resolution screenshots of the Tinder conversation with Veda, zooming in on the insults about me being boring. Below that, I had placed a clear, undeniable screenshot of the bank transfer history showing the house fund being drained to Lucky 7 Casino. I ordered 300 copies on the heaviest, most expensive cream cardstock available. I wanted the paper to feel substantial. I wanted the evidence to feel weighty in the guests' hands. When I picked up the boxes that afternoon, they felt heavier than paper. They felt like ammunition. The rehearsal dinner was held in the private room of an upscale Italian restaurant. The air was thick with the smell of garlic and expensive wine. Prescott's mother, Petra, sat at the head of the table, looking like a queen holding court. She had never liked me. She thought I wasn't good enough for her golden boy son. Throughout the meal, she made little digs at me. I hope you're ready to take care of a high-value man like Prescott, she said loudly, clinking her fork against her glass. He needs a woman who understands his ambition. I gripped the stem of my wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Prescott just laughed, patting his mother's hand. Don't scare her off, Mom, he chuckled. When it was my turn to make a toast, I stood up slowly. My legs felt steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating anger. I raised my glass and looked directly at Prescott. I just want to propose a toast, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. To honesty, to transparency, and to the truth coming to light no matter how hard someone tries to hide it. The room went quiet for a second. Prescott looked confused, his brow furrowing slightly. Then he laughed, a nervous, jerky sound. To the truth, he echoed, clearly thinking I was just tipsy or emotional from the stress. I drank from my glass, watching him over the rim. Enjoy your wine, Prescott, I thought. It's the last peaceful meal you're ever going to have. I excused myself to go to the restroom, needing a moment of silence away from Prescott's suffocating laughter. As I was washing my hands, the door swung open and Petra marched in. She didn't look at me in the mirror. She looked at my reflection with disdain. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick document. My lawyer drafted this today, she said, slamming it onto the marble countertop. It's a prenuptial agreement and a non-disclosure agreement. We need to protect the family assets. Prescott is too soft to ask you, so I'm doing it. I picked up the document. It was aggressive. It stated that if we divorced, I would get nothing. But then my eyes caught a clause near the bottom, infidelity clause. It stated that if either party was found to be unfaithful during the engagement or marriage, the cheating party would forfeit all claims to marital assets and would be liable for legal fees and damages. Petra had included it thinking I would be the one to cheat. She thought she was trapping a gold digger. I looked at Petra, and a manic, terrifying grin spread across my face. She took a step back, unsettled. Is there a problem? She snapped. No problem at all, Petra, I said. Do you have a pen? I signed the document with a flourish, pressing hard on the paper. I was signing my own safety net. I was signing Prescott's death warrant. I handed it back to her. Keep it safe, I whispered. You're going to need it. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and cruel. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, the kind of weather brides pray for. I sat in the bridal suite, my hair already done in intricate waves, my makeup flawless. Zayla sat next to me, holding her phone. He messaged again, she said quietly. It was 8:00 a.m. Prescott was supposed to be getting dressed, reflecting on the commitment he was about to make. Instead, he was messaging Veda. I looked at the screen. The message read, "Can't wait to meet you next week. Wifey will be busy working so I can slip away." He used the word wifey with such mockery. It made my skin crawl. Screenshot it, I ordered. Zayla captured the image, making sure the timestamp, today 8:00 a.m. was clearly visible. We had a small portable printer in the suite brought specifically for this moment. I printed a single copy of that final message on a small strip of paper. I folded it carefully, my fingers precise and steady. Then I took my bridal bouquet, a stunning arrangement of white roses and lilies. I tucked the small piece of paper deep into the center of the flowers, hidden among the stems. It was my talisman. If I felt my resolve weakening, if I felt any pity for him at the altar, I would look down at that paper and remember that while I was putting on my dress, he was planning his adultery. The church began to fill up. I could hear the murmur of voices from the vestry where I waited. Zayla had given strict instructions to the ushers, who were friends of hers and in on the plan. "Hand out the program's picture side up," she had told them. "Do not let anyone turn them over until the service starts." It was a risky move, but people are generally polite at weddings. They hold the program, admire the gold foil names, and wait. I peeked through the crack in the heavy wooden doors. I saw the guests filing in. My family on the left, looking happy and proud. Prescott's family on the right, looking haughty and bored. And there was Prescott. He was standing at the altar, joking with his best man. He adjusted his cufflinks, looking out at the crowd with a smug expression of ownership. He looked like a man who had gotten away with murder. He was laughing at something the groomsmen said, throwing his head back. He looked so comfortable in his deception. He had no idea that 300 people were holding the evidence of his betrayal in their hands. He had no idea that the woman walking toward him wasn't his bride, but his judge, jury, and executioner. The organ music started its deep, rumbling prelude. It was time. I watched him from the back of the church, but in my mind I was already imagining what he was about to see. I imagined the moment through his eyes. He would see me reach the altar. He would see the priest, Father Thomas, step forward. Father Thomas was a good man who despised adultery. When I had shown him the evidence privately an hour ago, he had agreed to help. He wouldn't perform the ceremony, but he would facilitate the reveal. Prescott would be expecting the opening prayer. Instead, Father Thomas would say, "Before we begin, the bride requests a moment of reflection. Please turn your programs over to the back page." I imagined Prescott's confusion. He would frown. He would look at his best man, who would shrug and flip the paper. I imagined Prescott looking at the front row. He would see Petra. He would see her impatient expression as she flipped the cardstock. And then he would see her face collapse. Her jaw would drop, her eyes would bulge, and the color would drain from her skin until she looked like a corpse. She would look up at him, not with pride, but with pure, unadulterated horror. Prescott would panic. He would snatch the program from his best man's hand. He would look down. And there, in high definition, he would see his own face, his own words, and his own bank transfers. He would see the destruction of his life printed in black and white. Reality played out exactly as I had envisioned, but the sound was something I hadn't prepared for. As the priest gave the instruction, there was a rustling sound, the sound of 300 pieces of heavy paper being turned over simultaneously. It sounded like the wings of a giant flock of birds taking flight. Then there was a pause, a heartbeat of silence, and then the gasp. It started in the front rows and rippled backward like a wave. It was a collective intake of breath, a sound of pure shock. "Oh my God," someone whispered loudly. "Is this real?" another voice asked. The church went deathly silent. The air was sucked out of the room. Prescott was holding the program now. His hands were shaking so hard the paper was vibrating. He was staring at it, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and terrified. The smugness was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. He looked small and pathetic. I stood tall at the altar, my bouquet held loosely in my hand. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked over to the podium and pulled the microphone from its stand. The feedback whined for a split second, a sharp noise that made everyone flinch. "Prescott," I said, my voice amplified and echoing off the stone walls. "I think you have something to explain to Veda, and well, everyone here." Prescott's face turned a violent shade of red, then instantly drained to a sickly white. He looked around the room, his eyes darting frantically for an exit, for an ally, for anything. He locked eyes with his mother, but Petra was staring at the program in her lap, refusing to look at him. He turned back to me, and a desperate, manic smile plastered itself onto his face. He lunged toward me, trying to grab the microphone. "It's a joke," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Babe, it's a profound joke." "You got me, it's a prank. Everyone, it's just a wedding prank." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled wheeze. I took a step back, keeping the microphone out of his reach. My expression didn't change. "Is the missing $50,000 from the house fund a prank too, Prescott?" I asked calmly. The question hung in the air. The crowd's murmur shifted instantly. The shock turned into anger. My father stood up in the third row, his face thunderous. Prescott's best man took a step away from him, looking at the bank statement on the program with disgust. "You stole her money," a cousin from my side shouted. "It's not what it looks like," Prescott screamed, sweat pouring down his forehead. "I was investing it. It was a surprise." But the program showed the transfers to Lucky 7 Casino. The lie died in his throat. I looked out at the sea of faces. My friends, my family, his family. I felt a strange sense of peace. The worst had happened, and I was still standing. I brought the microphone to my lips for the final time. "There will be no wedding today," I announced. My voice was steady, projecting strength I didn't know I possessed. "However, the reception venue is fully paid for and the food is non-refundable. I refuse to let good steak and champagne go to waste." A few people chuckled nervously. "Everyone is invited to the Solange is single celebration," I continued. "We are going to eat, drink, and celebrate freedom." I turned to look at Prescott one last time. He was slumped against the altar railing, looking like a broken man. "Prescott," I said, my voice cold as ice, "you are not invited." With that, I handed the microphone to the stunned priest. I turned on my heel, my silk dress swirling around me. I began the walk back down the aisle. For a second, there was silence. Then my sister started clapping. Then Zayla. Then my parents. Suddenly, the entire left side of the church, and a good portion of the right, erupted into thunderous applause. I walked out of the church, head held high, leaving the wreckage of my relationship behind me. I burst out into the bright sunlight of the church steps, the fresh air hitting my face. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. But the moment was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps pounding on the pavement behind me. "Solange, Solange, stop!" It was Prescott. He had chased me out of the church. He grabbed my arm, his grip painful and desperate. I spun around, ripping my arm from his grasp. He looked deranged, his tie crooked, his hair messy. "You ruined my life." He screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "You humiliated me in front of everyone, in front of my boss, in front of my mother." I looked at him with pure pity. He still didn't get it. He still thought this was something I had done to him. "I didn't do this, Prescott," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You did this. You ruined your life the moment you downloaded Tinder. You ruined it when you stole my savings. I just turned on the lights." Zayla stepped between us, her phone held high, the red recording light blinking. "Back off, Prescott," she warned. "I'm live streaming this. Say one more word, and the internet will decide your fate." Prescott looked at the phone, then at me. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He turned and ran toward the parking lot, fleeing the scene of his own crime. The drive to the reception venue was a blur of adrenaline. Zayla sat in the passenger seat, glued to her phone, tapping furiously. "Solange, you have no idea," she said, her eyes wide. "The video, it's exploding." She had uploaded the clip of the confrontation at the altar and the interaction on the church steps to TikTok. In the 30 minutes it took to drive to the banquet hall, the video had already racked up 100,000 views. The internet works fast, and it loves a villain. The comments were pouring in faster than she could read them. "They've dubbed him the Tinder groom," Zayla laughed, showing me the screen. People were dissecting his facial expressions, screenshotting the program from the video, and making memes of his panicked "it's a prank" face. #TinderGroom was already trending on Twitter. Strangers from all over the world were commenting, offering support, dragging him, and sharing their own stories of betrayal. Prescott hadn't just been exposed to our 300 guests, he had been exposed to the world. His reputation wasn't just damaged, it was being atomized by the collective wrath of the internet. The reception was unlike any wedding party I had ever attended. There was no first dance, no bouquet toss, and no awkward speeches. Instead, it was a riot. The DJ, who had been briefed on the situation, switched the playlist from romantic ballads to high-energy breakup anthems. "I Will Survive" blasted through the speakers as we walked in. The mood was electric. It wasn't a funeral for a relationship. It was a birthday party for my new life. I walked to the center of the dance floor, took off my veil, the symbol of the bride I was supposed to be, and threw it into the decorative fire pit on the patio. The crowd cheered. Even some of Prescott's cousins, the ones who had always secretly found him insufferable, were there. They came up to me, apologizing for his behavior, shaking their heads in disbelief at the audacity of his cheating. They ate the expensive steak and drank the premium scotch that Prescott had insisted on ordering but hadn't paid for. I danced with my friends, with my dad, with Zayla. We laughed until our sides hurt. It was a moment of pure solidarity. The worst thing had happened and I was okay. I was better than okay. I was free. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, or rather, the bed in the apartment I would soon be leaving. The silence of the morning was broken by the relentless buzzing of my phone. I picked it up. Dozens of missed calls from Prescott, followed by a string of text messages that ranged from begging to threatening. "I'm going to sue you for defamation," one text read. "You destroyed my character." I rolled my eyes and made a pot of coffee. I called the lawyer I had consulted briefly the day before the wedding. I met him an hour later. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had watched the viral video with great amusement. "Can he sue me?" I asked, sipping my coffee. The lawyer shook his head. "Defamation requires the information to be false," he explained. "You printed screenshots of his actual profile and his actual bank statements. Truth is an absolute defense against libel and slander. He can sue, but he will lose, and he will have to pay your legal fees. Let him try." I left the office feeling bulletproof. Prescott could threaten all he wanted, but he had no ground to stand on. While I was meeting with the lawyer, Prescott was discovering the full extent of his financial ruin. According to Zayla, who had heard from a mutual friend, Prescott had tried to access the remaining wedding accounts that morning. He had gambling debts, serious ones, and bookies who were not known for their patience. He thought he could pull the remaining money from the vendor refunds to pay them off, but he was too late. The moment I found the Tinder profile, I had called the bank and frozen every joint asset we had. I had flagged the transactions as suspicious and initiated a fraud investigation regarding the house fund. His access was completely cut off. He was standing in a bank lobby, screaming at a teller, with absolutely zero access to funds. He was broke. He was publicly shamed. And now, the people he owed money to were going to start looking for him. The high-roller lifestyle he had been faking was collapsing around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. I was packing boxes in the apartment when the doorbell rang. I stiffened, expecting Prescott. I checked the peephole. It was Petra. I took a deep breath and opened the door, ready for a fight. I expected her to scream at me, to blame me for ruining her family's reputation. Instead, she looked haggard. Her perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and she looked 10 years older than she had at the rehearsal dinner. She walked in and sat heavily on a box. "He borrowed money from me too," she said, her voice flat. My jaw dropped. "What?" Petra looked up, her eyes filled with fury, not at me but at her son. "He told me he needed $50,000 for your engagement ring. He said he wanted to get you a perfect diamond." She looked at the ring on my finger, which I had taken off and placed on the counter. "I had it appraised this morning," I told her. "It's cubic zirconia. It's worth maybe $200. Petra let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "He gambled my money too. The shame." "Solange, the shame he has brought on our family name is unforgivable." She wasn't there to defend him. She was there to disown him. "I'm leaving today," I told Petra. "I can't stay here." Petra nodded. "Good, you shouldn't." Then a thought occurred to me. "The lease," I said. "We just renewed it for the bigger unit." I scrambled to find the paperwork. I pulled the lease agreement out of the file cabinet. I scanned the signatures. I started to laugh. It was a hysterical, relieved laughter. Prescott, in his arrogance and need for control, had insisted on signing the lease in his name only. He had wanted to surprise me with the upgrade and had used my income statements to qualify, but he had never actually added me to the legal contract. "He's the only one on the lease," I said, showing Petra the document. "I'm not liable for the rent." The rent on this place was $4,000 a month. Prescott had no job, no savings, and no access to funds. And he was legally on the hook for a year of rent in a luxury apartment he couldn't afford. I packed the last of my things. I wasn't just leaving him. I was leaving him with a financial anchor that would drag him to the bottom of the ocean. The fallout didn't stop at his bank account. Prescott worked as a mid-level manager at a conservative financial firm. They handled other people's money. Trust was their currency. The video of me exposing his theft of the house fund had circulated widely enough that it reached his company's compliance officer. Zayla sent me a screenshot of his LinkedIn profile later that day. His status had changed to open to work. Apparently, stealing $50,000 from your fiancé doesn't look good when your job is managing client assets. He had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. Given the clear evidence in the viral video, he was fired for cause within 48 hours. He had lost his wife, his home, his reputation, and now his career. The destruction was total, and he had done it all to himself. A week later, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I received an email from the wedding planner regarding the vendor deposits. Usually, when a wedding is canceled, the deposits are lost. But I had sent the planner a copy of the document Petra had forced me to sign, the one with the infidelity clause. It also had a section regarding premarital asset division in case of cancellation due to cause. Because Prescott was the one who caused the cancellation through infidelity, and because the document defined the deposits as premarital assets invested by the couple, the clause triggered a refund mechanism. The vendors, seeing the legal threat and the viral publicity, agreed to refund the non-refundable deposits to me as damages. I got back almost $30,000, money that Prescott had originally contributed as his share of the wedding costs. He had paid for his own punishment. I took the check, deposited it into my personal account, and booked a one-way ticket to Europe. 6 months later, I sat at a small, round table outside a cafe in the Montmartre district of Paris. The autumn air was crisp, smelling of roasted chestnuts and rain. I took a sip of my espresso and idly scrolled through my phone. I checked Zayla's update. She had sent me a link to a public bankruptcy filing. Prescott had officially filed for Chapter 7. He was living in Petra's basement, working a minimum-wage job, and was still being harassed by internet trolls. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. He was just a ghost from a past life. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. A shadow fell over me. I looked up to see a man standing there. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Excuse me," he said in a charming accent. "Is this seat taken?" I looked at the empty chair opposite me. Then I looked at the man. His name was Rhodes, I would learn later. But in that moment, he was just a possibility, a new chapter. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached my eyes. "No," I said, my voice steady and happy. "It's free, and so am I."